What is up, everybody? Nick here, and today we're going to be doing something just a little bit different than we usually do. We're going to be restoring this vintage Ludwig drum kit. To tell you a bit of a backstory on this drum kit, it actually belonged to the father of two of my friends from high school, Ed Schickling. Ed is moving to a new area and couldn't bring the drum set with him, and he wanted to find a new home for it where he knew that it would be well treated, well cared for, and knew the person would appreciate the drum set. He was talking to his one son, Alex, who is also a drummer, and they both decided that what a better home to bring it to than give it to me. And it's amazing, it's humbling, and I am honored for them to think of me in that regard. So now what we have to do is bring this thing back to life and to the original status that it was when it first came from the Ludwig factory. So looking at the serial number and seeing how it begins in 458, we can determine that this drum set is from 1967. Digging a little bit deeper into the sizes of the drums, kick drum is 14 by 20, rack tom is 8 by 12, and the floor tom is 14 by 14. This allows us to identify the kit as one of the Downbeat series drum kits from the 60s. So we know the era of the kit, we know what series kit it is, and we can see that the wrap is Blue Oyster. The wrap on these drums is actually in really good shape. It's not starting to separate or fall apart. It's a little bit dirty because of how it was stored, but we're going to try and restore it to the best of our abilities to revitalize it a little bit. This drum kit did not come with the matching 4x14 Downbeat snare drum, but that's okay. It did come with another snare drum from the 60s. Looking at the Ludwig badge and seeing the markings on it, it's safe to say that that snare drum is from the changeover era when the company was transitioning from WFL over to Ludwig. So what are some of the things we have to do to restore this drum kit? Well, the first thing we're going to have to do is strip the drums of all of the hardware and clean off the shells. Cleaning off these shells is really going to bring a nice shine back to the shells and the finish. While it's all apart, we're also going to be taking a look at the hardware to make sure that it all still works and is fully functional. We're also going to be calling our good friends over at Ludwig and making sure that we replace some of the hardware with some newer components that will last when I take it out to play. While the drums are all apart, we're going to check them to make sure they're still in round. If they're not, we're going to try our best to put them back in round. And while we're at it, we're going to get the bearing edges recut. Once all of that is done, we're going to put the drums back together. We'll replace any hardware that needs to be replaced, get new hoops for some of the missing hoops or tension rods for some of the missing tension rods. And we're also going to be putting brand new heads on the entire kit, so it'll be a nice vintage drum kit, restored, ready to go. This whole restoration process is going to take us a while. It's not going to be something that we can do in one video. Actually, we could do it in one video, but it would be extremely long and you might get a little bored. So what we're going to do is we're going to break this down into smaller videos throughout the entire restoration process. This particular video, I wanted to introduce you to the drum kit, kind of give you a backstory with it, as well as go over some of the research that we ran to figure out what era it's from, what model it is, etc., etc. Now, we have to get our hands dirty a little bit. So the first thing we have to do is take these drums apart. Alright, so before we dive into taking apart these drums, one thing that I am noticing, as I mentioned before, is that the toms themselves do not have bottom hoops. Obviously, we're going to have to get the hoops and the tension rods. Really great thing about these drums, however, is they did come with an internal muffling system. So I'm going to flip the drum over. And you can see that they are still in the drum and they actually still work, which is awesome. You can see, since these didn't have a bottom hoop or head, that the bearing edges are a little rough. So we are probably going to have to get these recut. Shouldn't be that big of a deal. We'll put a nice round over on them to give them a nice full warm tone. Since we were able to identify that these drums are actually from 67, you can see that they have the white interior with the solid maple re-rings. We can determine that these are actually mahogany poplar mahogany shells. Checking Ludwig's website, they did state that beginning September/October 1968 is when they switched over to the maple poplar maple finish. And since we were able to notice from the badges, seeing that these are from 1967, you can see here on the badge, it starts with 458. That shows us that these drums are from 1967. Now, one thing I also noticed with the 14-inch as well is that it looks like it may be just slightly out of round. It has a flat spot right here on the back end of the shell. But looking from the top, it doesn't look too bad. So this is salvageable. Again, it also has the muffle system. It's still built in and works and fully functional, which is awesome. Now these floor tom brackets, we're gonna see if we can clean them up. Luckily they have the wing nuts on them, so we don't have to worry about that. But if we can't clean them up, we'll just get some of the new vintage looking ones from Ludwig, so it looks exactly the same. The one on the rack tom, however, we are going to upgrade and replace with one of the newer vintage brackets from Ludwig, so that way there's a wing nut and I don't have to bring a wrench with me to tighten this to the rail mount. Checking out the bass drum is actually in pretty good shape. It is missing a claw and tension rod on the front, but other than that, it looks pretty good. We are also going to be replacing the rail mount, again, with one that is a modern rail mount from Ludwig, so that way we don't have to bring a wrench with us to adjust the rail mount when we're trying to put this in and out of a case or put the rack tom on it. Now on to the snare drum. Like we said earlier, we were able to identify that this snare drum came from that transition era between WFL and Ludwig. We can determine that by the badge itself. There is no serial number, it just says Ludwig Drum Company, Chicago. But then also if we look at the throw off, first of all, this is a WFL throw off, and you can kind of see it up here. It's a little hard to tell. There we go. You can see it says WFL on it. Now if we also go around to the butt plate, that also has WFL on it. Now the one thing Ed did warn me about the snare drum is that he did buy this from a friend. They painted the inside of the shell gold, and they didn't take any of the hardware off. They just kind of took a paintbrush and just painted it. So we're gonna try our best to remove that without removing the white underfinish. If not, we're just gonna leave it as is, recut the bearing edges on this, get some new snare wires, because that's going to be needed, as well as potentially a new throw off if we can't bring it back to life. So let's start getting these drums taken apart. The tool that we're going to be using to really help us get these drums apart is this amazing Remo Quick Key. If you haven't gotten one, I highly recommend it because it does have a magnetic point in the bottom so you don't lose your tension rods. It also has an adapter on here so you can attach to a drill and go from there. We are not going to be using a drill, we're going to be going by hand. We do have the snare drum completely taken apart and the 12-inch rack tom taken apart, minus the internal muffling. When I was looking at the internal muffle system, seeing that there are springs and a lot of stuff going on there, it just doesn't make sense to take that apart because it's in really good shape. So we're just gonna polish the knob on the outside, the baseball bat knob on the outside, so it shines a little bit better than it currently is, and we should be good to go with that. Now for the snare drum, remember how we said that they painted the inside gold? Yeah, we weren't kidding. So once we took all the screws off, you can see the original white from the Ludwig factory. We're gonna try and see if we can get the remaining gold off. We'll have to do some research and see how to do that. The wrap itself, you can see, is a little bit faded, as if it was in the sun, just dirty, anything like that. We are going to clean that up. Even the 12-inch Tom, you can see the color difference isn't that bad between the two, and I think these are going to come out really nice when we're done. Let's flip it around, and you can even see the wrap seam is in really good shape. It's not peeling, coming apart, or anything like that. So we're going to keep this. The inside of the shell actually is pretty dirty, to my surprise. So we are going to have to clean the shell both inside and out to get rid of all of this excess dirt and be good to go. Now you may be asking yourself what happened to the hardware, and the hardware is over here in this bucket. What we have here is just some water and a little bit of Blue Dawn. We're going to let that sit for 24 hours to get rid of all the rust, dirt, and anything else that might be on the hardware. And then we're going to thoroughly clean it and dry it, making sure that we don't have any water left over in any of the hardware. Once that's done, we are then going to hit all of the hardware with Eagle One Never Dull. You can pick that up at any car auto shop, auto store, and it works wonders for this hardware that might be just a little dull because it's just been weathered and old. All right, welcome back, day 2. So the hardware from the snare drum and rack tom have been soaking in some Blue Dawn and water for about 24 hours or so. So now what we have to do is get all of this out, dried, and then we have to polish it. Okay, now that everything is out of the water solution, you can kind of take a look at the lugs. They don't look that bad. Nice and clean. There's still a little bit of dirt in certain areas, but compared to, say, like the floor tom, that's what they originally look like, especially that one over there. See how it's like very hazy looking? And these now look a lot different. And then what we're going to do is once we polish them, they're going to really shine up. So the next step is we're going to use this towel to finish thoroughly drying all of this to make sure that there is no water left over inside the lugs. But take a look at the water. That was clear water with just Blue Dawn. You can see there's a lot of dirt in there. That's just from this sitting in there for about 24 hours or so. So we're going to thoroughly dry this, and then we're going to go into the polishing portion. All right, you still with me here? So here's what we have. We have some Eagle One Never Dull, which is what I told you is an awesome polisher for any kind of metal, chrome, anything like that. So first thing we're gonna do is all of the lugs are dried, they're ready to go. So what I do is, of course, I put gloves on because sometimes things like polishes and other chemicals like that can affect your hands. So I always recommend just putting gloves on, protect yourself. You don't have to. And you also need a microfiber cloth. And the reason why is because this is basically a wadding polish. So you break a piece off and you use this to polish the hardware. You're gonna have to wipe the polish off with the microfiber cloth afterwards. So take a lug and you just use the Never Dull. Go around the entire lug. It's okay if you get a little bit comes apart. Then you take a microfiber cloth, because you can see that it has a little bit of a haze to it now. So what you do now, take that microfiber cloth and wipe all that excess polish off of the lug. And as you can see, it's now nice and shiny compared to what it used to look like. So let's get these here. You can see that there is a big difference between them. So we're gonna go and use this on all of the lugs and then go from there. Now the big thing here too, especially when we're going through all of these lugs, is that you are going to notice pitting in the chrome. You're going to notice if any of the chrome has started to peel off of the lug. For me, my goal with this is to not make it look brand spanking new as if it just came out of the factory from the 60s. My goal with this is to just clean it up, get rid of the dirt, anything that could be a contaminant that could make the chrome pit even more than it already has. And from far away, it is going to look nice and clean. If I wanted it to look brand spanking new, it doesn't pay to get this stuff re-chromed. It's going to cost you a fortune to do so. It's actually cheaper to just go out and buy new lugs, but you are limited to where you can get the lugs from. You either have to go on eBay or Reverb, or you have to check out some vintage drum websites, anything like that. Maybe you'll find somebody in your area that is getting rid of some old stuff. They may have some extra hardware lying around, or you can always try and get the lugs from Ludwig direct. For the most part, I believe they would fit. I don't think that they have redesigned to the extent that they wouldn't fit, but you are running that risk, so it's best to just take the hardware that came with the drum set and really clean it up. Now this one in particular has a lot of scuffing contaminants on it, so you're gonna scrub a little bit extra, which is no big deal. We have plenty of Neverdull if we need to use more. So now that those are done, we are going to move on to the single-sided ones for the rack tom. Here are two, just out of the solution of the Blue Dawn and water. They are nice and clean. We are going to polish them, and then we'll A/B the two so you can see the difference that the Neverdull does do. Let's do it. Huge difference. You can actually see my reflection in that one. All right, let's do the rest of them. Alright, so welcome back, and all of the hardware for the two drums has been cleaned and dried. Now, of course, with the polishing, we polished all of the lugs, we polished the tom holder, we polished the throw-off and butt plate, we even polished the receiver tubes for the lugs themselves. That way, we're not going to have a polished lug with a rusted, dirty-looking receiver tube for the tension rod to go into. As far as the rest of it, the screws, springs, there's really no need to do it. If I wanted to be particular, I could, but I highly doubt anyone's going to be taking apart these drums to take a look at the springs or anything inside the lugs or the internals of the drum. And besides, I'm playing this is going to be my drum kit. I just wanted to have a little bit nicer look than it currently does. Okay, so now that all the hardware has been cleaned and polished, it's time to get to the shell. So as we talked about before, shells are actually pretty dirty. The bottom heads and hoops were taken off of them, but the actual wrap itself isn't in that bad a shape. So what we're going to do is we are going to rely on a few tools to get this cleaned. First thing is good old water and Blue Dawn to just clean off all the dirt and everything else. If there is any residual dirt after that, we are going to use some of our goof off. That'll help get rid of that excess dirt. So once all of that is done, we will be using a polishing compound to clean up the shell a little bit. We use a polishing compound because it isn't as abrasive as a rubbing compound, and it'll help us just bring that drum back to life. Once that is done, we are going to finish up with some Caranuba wax. Of course, we want to make sure that after we put all of this work and effort forth with revitalizing this drum, that we want to protect it. So we're going to put some wax on it to protect it and be good to go. So let's get started. Let's start cleaning this drum. I'm going to start with the inside of the drum first. Alright, so looking at the shell, it is a little bit better, but it still has a good amount of dirt. So we are going to try some of the goof off to get rid of that excess dirt. Off of the shell. It's not going to be super squeaky clean white, but that's okay. It's not going to look like it's been sitting in somebody's basement or in a storage facility for a few years. Cool. So, taking a look at the inside of the shell, you can see it's pretty good. Some of the paint has chipped off, but that was from before. It wasn't from what we just did, but it helps just kind of bring it back to life a little bit. So now we have to do the same thing to the outside of the shell. So shell is clean, so what we're going to do now is we are going to get some of the polishing compound. We're going to polish the whole outside of the shell, and then it'll be ready to be put back together. Now with polishing compound, it's just like a car, because it's made for a car. Put a little bit on a microfiber cloth, shake it up first, put a little bit on a microfiber cloth, like so, and then in a circular motion, we will apply it to the shell. Okay, now that that has been applied, we're going to take a clean microfiber towel and we are going to wipe all of that off the shell. Okay, now we're going to take some of our wax, apply it to the shell again, just like a car, in a circular motion. It's going to help just kind of bring it back to life a little bit, make it shine a little more, and protect it. Alright, we're going to repeat that process for the rest of the shells and then start putting them back together. And that is it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed the process so far. What we have to do next is get these drums put back together. And then we have to do this all over again with the bass drum and the floor tom. After we do all of that, we will check the shells to make sure they're still in round, recut bearing edges, and then put new heads on them, and they're ready to go. If you like this video and you're viewing on YouTube, please make sure to give it a big old thumbs up and make sure that you hit the subscribe button below to be notified for the next video of this restoration. Thank you again for checking it out, and I'll see you soon.